What's going on, guys? So, as you may have noticed by the title of the video, we just reached 100,000 subscribers, which is fantastic. Yeah, I've been waiting for this moment for a couple years, so thank you very much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find the email address of everyone who's subscribed to my channel, and I'm going to personally write them a thank you. Actually, wait, no, I won't do that. So to celebrate, what better way than to do a Q&A, because I am definitely very inspired. So I created a post on the YouTubes, and I asked you to send me questions, and sure enough, a lot of you did. So in no particular order, here are the questions. All99 says, when did you created Tony, or the idea of? What do you recommend of hardware to start on 3D animation? So the idea for Tony actually came from one of the episodes I made with my character Nicky, who's the, well, I say my character, he's obviously inspired from the Happy Tree Friends universe, right, where he's just basically one of the... He's just a fox that kind of had my old haircut. I don't have that haircut anymore, but I used to. So yeah, I don't know. I just had this idea of a funny episode where he'd be, just dancing on my speakers and making a lot of noise, and I'd be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the thing is, because I had already kind of wanted to wean myself away from Happy Tree Friends and start, making my own characters, I noticed that this episode, although the character is obviously inspired from Happy Tree Friends, has absolutely nothing to do with Happy Tree Friends. I was like, oh, well, this could work with absolutely any character. So I thought, well, you know what? I'll go ahead and make my own. And then as well, the reason why I switched to 3D, it's a lot easier to track a 3D character in a 3D environment than a 2D character in a 3D environment. So I thought, if I'm going to create my own character, I might as well make him 3D. And so that's where I decided to make Tony. And yeah, I'm not too sure why I went with this particular design. I just kind of, the character just kind of popped in my head, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go ahead and make that. And as for the hardware, the thing is, with Blender, you do not need some kind of crazy rocket computer to run Blender. In fact, your nan's computer could probably run it just fine. If you want to create like a simple character or a simple scene, like I said, just a crappy laptop with like 4 gigs of RAM at least, but like just the basic computer could definitely run Blender, and of course it's free. You can download it right now. Where you do start needing a little bit of horsepower is when you start rendering, but rendering is a very specific task, and that's when you actually have your scene laid out and lit and everything, and you want to actually create a photorealistic image. In that case, yeah, you probably do want, like a decent graphics card or whatnot. Although now you can use online rendering farms. In fact, for the longest time, I've used a Render Street. You just send them your file, and they render it out on their crazy render farm, and they just send you back the PNGs or the file or whatever, and you're done. So yeah, don't think, oh, I can't do Blender because I need to save up to get this massive Threadripper CPU and this and that. If you have a computer, you can pretty much run it. Skaggles The Squirrel asks, how much mischief does Tony get into in a single day? Well, basically so much that I've locked him in the car right now, and he's probably burning outside because it's like 40 degrees. Wilson R asks, how did you learn to use Blender, and how much time is needed? So how did I learn Blender? Well, basically on YouTube. In fact, I completely learned Blender on YouTube. Mainly Blender Guru tutorials. Now, I know a lot of you have sent me emails and asking questions about where to learn Blender, and I always refer to Blender Guru's donut tutorial, the legendary donut tutorial.
Not too shabby.
That's the one I started with, and I think a lot of CG artists, especially who use Blender, have started with the donuts. It's something something we all have to do. But yeah, if you're completely new to Blender, I would definitely recommend that tutorial. I'll have the link in the description. Now, if you're asking how long it takes to learn the software, I would probably say, a good 20 hours of just non-stop, watching tutorials and just trying to understand the tools and stuff. Yeah, in 20 hours, you could probably get a decent grasp on the software. But the time needed to actually, produce a CG character and animate and, light and things like that, definitely more than 20 hours. I would probably... a good, year or two of, just practice and practice. It's not because you have the world's best pencil that you can draw. Blamatrix. Sure I'm pronouncing that right. Blamatrix. Blamixtrick01 says, hey, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My question is, how did you get into animating? Just starting out myself, so I'm curious learning about other people's experiences. So interestingly, I have only been doing animation for a few years now. I used to be very interested in film and cinematography. Maybe when I was like 8 years old, I would pinch my parents' old school VHS camcorder, and I would just film random, not even I wouldn't even call them films. Literally, I would just film random things and try and make a movie with them. Yeah, of course back then I had no editing software. In fact, I didn't even have a computer, so everything had to be I had to get it right on the first try, because then when you would play the VHS tape back, it would it would sequence automatically, and that's how you would see the finished film. And so that's how I basically started out doing just quick little films and little special effects. In fact, I think I know what got me interested in special effects more particularly. And if you live in France, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. It's this kids TV show called C'est pas sorcier, and they have one particular episode where they talk all about movie special effects. And it was it's quite old, so it's mainly practical effects. But in one of the scenes, they explain how to make an object disappear with your parents' camcorder, basically. And of course, you put the camcorder down, you hit record, you film an object or whatever. As long as the camera doesn't move, then you hit pause, remove the object, and then hit play again. And they say, oh, and the object should magically disappear. And when I was watching that, I was like, yeah, right, there's no way. But of course, I got my parents' camcorder and I gave it a try. And of course, the object disappeared, and I was looking at it like, what kind of sorcery is this? But it was just great, and I was like, oh my god, this is absolutely awesome. So if I can do this, what else can I do? So that's kind of how I was interested in film. Then actually, when I was probably about maybe like 12 years old, I think back in 2010, I actually downloaded Blender. Of course, I was greeted with the wonderful default cube, and because of the the right click, left click, I couldn't even figure out how to how to select the damn thing. So basically, I gave up and I closed Blender, and that was the end of it for another like 10 years. And then when I was probably about maybe 13 or 14, I got a laptop and I started playing around in Sony Vegas. Was the first proper editing software I ever played with. And of course, I'd do all kinds of like the basic like green screens and things like that. And of course, it was a lot of fun, but nothing really related to art in the in the sense in the traditional sense, like like drawing and painting and things like that. It was always more film and sound mainly. And then around 2016, I was at a New Year's Eve party actually, and a couple of my friends were watching Happy Tree Friends, and I had never heard of it before. I guess that's because I live under a rock or something. And I was watching it, and of course I found it absolutely hilarious, because I just love the idea of taking these cute innocent characters and just destroying them. It's 100% my type of humor. And then one day, for some reason, I was just like, hey, why don't I try and make my own? I think Mondo made these short Happy Tree Friends episodes called Smoochies or something, where it was just one character and they died like 3 times. It was just like a simple animation thing. And I thought, hey, maybe I could try and do that. In Vegas, you can... I knew how to more or less animate images, with, like keyframes and stuff. And I thought, well, I'll try and, make a character in Paint and have different, different... well, in Flash, it would be called symbols, I guess. But, in Paint, I would just be like, oh, I'll draw out the arm, and then I'll draw out the body and the head and have different just PNGs. And then in Vegas, I'll move them around and see what I can do. Of course, it looked hideous. So I kind of, did a little bit of research, and I found Inkscape. And I learned about, vector drawing. And I learned that, with Inkscape and vector art, you can create perfect curves and shapes. Without a tablet, it was just with a mouse and with Bezier curves, and that immediately I was like, yes, this is exactly this is exactly the type of tool I need. So I started playing around in Inkscape, and then I think the first piece of animation software I ever used was Synfig Studio, and that is the software I used to animate the flaky smoochy thing where she has a bottle of champagne and it explodes in her face. And that was basically one of the first animations I'd ever made. The very first animation I'd ever made was a Giggles walk cycle, and I thought, oh, actually that looks quite nice, let's make a little video out of it. And I of course I filmed myself on the hammock, and I was like, ooh, I'm so surprised. And in Vegas, I composited her into it, and I had her walk past me, and that was my first ever animation. And so by the time I'd made the Giggles walk cycle, I'd been animating for 1 week, and the flaky smoochy thing video was probably I'd been animating when when I'd finished it. I'd been animating for 3 weeks, and then yeah, the rest is history. If you look at my channel, you'll see the evolution of my work, and then obviously later on I transitioned into 3D. So of course now I use Blender. Yeah, I do a lot of freelancing, which is why I don't upload so much anymore. And right now what I'm doing is I'm building a portfolio and a demo reel. So it's just like a compilation of all my all my characters and stuff. And I'm going to send that to Pixar, Disney, ILM, just the classic big studios, and hopefully, get a job. And yeah, we'll see how that works out. So that's pretty much the story of me and my obsession with animation. Crooked Candy 3 asks, who would win, Flippy from Happy True Friends or Krog from Primal Flippy? Nitro Soldier says, what were you doing before you made your YouTube channel? I assume you're referring to this one, the Nicky channel. Up until now, I've been studying mechanical engineering. And that's actually been one of my first hobbies as a kid. It's just technology and electronics and mechanics in particular and things like that. Yeah, and on my other channel, I make all kinds of crazy things. I made like this massive fog machine, or I made a crazy loud siren and like a super powerful stun gun. So yeah, go check that out if you're interested in more technical things. Deno says, am I going to appear in this video? Absolutely not. Darkness the Chicken Nugget says, what time do you sleep? So I'm definitely more of a night owl, so I'll usually go to sleep at around like maybe 4 or 5 a.m. Then I'll get up at like 12 or 1 p.m. So of course, mornings do not exist in my universe. Nitro Soldier again says, hey, wait a minute, why are you in my recommended? Oh, thanks, YouTube. Nimo says, congrats for the 100k sub. My question is, how do you be talented at everything? Well, thank you for the kind words. So I imagine you're referring to what I do on my second channel and what I do on this channel, and I could do like a bit of voice acting, and I just do a lot of things here and there. The reason is I tend to obsess over very specific things, and I don't choose to do that. My brain's just like, okay, now you're going to obsess over animation, and then it's like, oh, now you're going to obsess over this. I don't really choose that. I just go with the flow. But yeah, since I was a kid, I've always had this thing where I would just be like super interested and focused on one particular thing, and then I would just move on to the next, and it would just kind of work like that. And I've carried that till this day, and I'll probably keep living like that for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, the problem with that is that there is a downside. I do tend to obsess over good things, but unfortunately I do obsess over not so good things, and that's the probably the reason why I have OCD and a couple of other things like that. But yeah, that's just the way it is. So I'm just kind of rolling with it. It's okay. Taiwan asks, how much time do you usually spend on each part of a CGI video? So modeling, animating, setting up a scene, tracking, rendering, etc. And will there be more Tony animations in the future? So of course that completely depends. I guess if you want something to compare, so let's take for example Tony, the character I guess a lot of you have seen. If I had to remodel him, retexture him, re-rig him, it would probably, now it would probably take a good 100 hours. But back when I originally created him, he was my first proper CG character, and it took a long time. I started him, I believe, in May of 2018, and I finished him completely in January of 2019, and that was pretty much working on him at least, a good 20 to 30 hours a week. But that was also due to the fact that I didn't really know the software that well yet, and I still had like a lot of things to, like kinks to figure out. But now that I have more experience, it would probably take 100 hours. And that's not counting animation, of course. Animation, a good rule of thumb, I think, in 3D is, for a good solid animation, it would probably take about an hour per second of animation. So, you do the math, if you want to make a Disney film that's 2 hours long, it's a lot of work. And of course, that is assuming everything goes to plan, right? Because, for instance, right now I'm working on a visual effects shot, and pretty much everything went wrong. You'll see it on my channel, in fact, in a couple of weeks, hopefully. But yeah, it was just a nightmare. It's one of those things where you just film it and you go, whatever, I'll deal with it later in post. Don't do that, or just don't do that. Like I said, I'll make a whole video about it, but it involves tracking my arm, and in one of the shots, you straight up just don't see my arm at all, and it's like, how the hell am I supposed to track that? And actually, because I watched the clip when we were shooting it at the Bestie, and I was thinking, whatever, I'll figure it out. Just don't do that. Please try and, if ever you have to shoot a film and you need to do a lot of work in post, just try and think ahead. Howling Fox Productions says, I'm curious, are we going to get more Tony the Husky animations in the future? Maybe? Gui Huntless on Fire says, are you going to continue the Happy Tree Friends fan animation series you make? Actually, I would love to make more Happy Tree Friends related content. The problem is, I do not own the rights to these characters, right? The characters belong to Mondo Media. And the thing is, I tried sending them emails, I tried ringing them, I tried contacting a bunch of people. No one can really give me a legal endorsement or even any information on how I can get one. So the problem is that I don't want to start making Happy Tree Friends content and then Mondo just striking my entire channel for, you know, copyright claims or whatever. So unfortunately, at the moment, I don't really feel comfortable making too much content related to Happy Tree Friends. In fact, I don't feel comfortable making any more at all. But if I can get, you know, like a green light from Mondo, then yeah, definitely. Tabriz says, are you planning to make a short series or a short film in the future? So a short series, definitely not, but a short film, I would love to. In fact, I have one being written right now. The reason why I don't really feel like I want to start making a short series is that I always want the freedom to do whatever I want in the long term, and I don't want to start a series and then decide, actually, I'm fed up with this series, I don't really want to work on it anymore because I want to work on something else. I'm just going to leave the audience hanging and there won't be like a conclusion to the story or whatever. Whereas with a short film, it's, I work on it and then, I release it or I don't, but no one's really expecting anything. And, there's no like suspense that's just never going to be resolved. I guess the only instance where I would release a short series is if I have actually finished the every single episode beforehand and then I just start like uploading them one by one, but I do need the guarantee that I will work on, or that I'll produce them from start to finish. But knowing me, that's probably not something I would be happy doing. So yeah, your boy Taj, I'm butchering that name, I am so sorry. Why did you give Tony a voice? The voice is too good. So this might surprise a lot of you, but that was a joke. It was an April Fool's joke. I uploaded that video on the 1st of April. It was my friend Scoochie who did the voice, because he's got like a crazy deep voice.
Roubignol.
And I'm like, oh, why don't you voice Tony in with your big manly voice, and it'll be super funny, because you'd imagine Tony has the opposite voice, right? But for some reason, a lot of people seem to really like it, and they're like, oh yeah, that suits him. So I guess that's his voice now, right? That'll be his his official voice. Anim 3D Studio says, do you like 2D or 3D animation? So I would definitely consider myself a 3D artist or a 3D generalist. The reason is what's interesting is when you say 2D animation, a lot of people think of the traditional frame by frame, and that would be like the old school Walt Disney animations with Mickey Mouse, and they literally had to redraw the character for every single frame. That is something I definitely can't do, simply because I can't draw. I can absolutely not draw. I feel like I'm actually not too bad at copying. If you showed me like a portrait, like a photograph, I would probably be able to do a decent job of like copying like a fairly, with like shading and stuff. Simply because I think I've just got a good sense of like, proportions and lighting and things like that. But if you had to, if I had to just design a character from scratch with a pen and paper, it would just be a disaster. A lot of you might say, well, my first animations on my channel were 2D, right? Because it was like with the Happy Tree Friends, and there was no like third dimension, like, the dimension of depth or whatever. So even though technically it was 2D, the way the characters were rigged and the way they were animated is very similar to 3D in the sense that they have a rig and it's all like done with, I don't want to say tweening because that's more of like a flash term, but it's definitely, you have one pose keyed out and then another pose keyed out, and then everything would just work very similar to just 3D animation. So yeah, I've always been more of a 3D guy, but yeah, just don't ask me to draw with a pen and paper because that would be a disaster. Blue Z says, how to become a generalist like you? I mean, you're really talented at every single skill. Well, thank you very much. The answer to that is probably very simple and disappointing, but it's just practice everything. And the reason why I would consider myself a generalist is because I've been practicing more or less every single discipline in 3D, and that's because I have to. If I want to produce like a short film or even just like these little skits I do with Tony with like a CG character, in there is you have to do modeling, rigging, texturing, lighting, animating, rendering. There's so many different disciplines I need to know in order to produce a video like that. So yeah, I've basically just been practicing every single discipline, or or skill, if you want to see it that way. Now, what's interesting is that if you want to get a job, in a big studio like Disney or Pixar, you definitely don't want to be a generalist. You want to be extremely good at one particular discipline, because in a big studio like that, everyone works in a specific department. You'll have the lighting department, the texturing department, the layout department, and everyone would work in those specific departments. And a lot of times they would stay in that department. I mean, you'd rarely have an artist that would do everything, especially in a bigger studio. So yeah, so if you want to get a job in a big studio, I would advise you to figure out what skill you're best at, and then basically just nail that skill. Just practice that non-stop and do only that. Don't try and be good at everything, because you'd be much better off extremely good at one particular skill and absolutely crap at everything else than decent at everything. 100%. But then if, like me, you want to do freelancing, in which case you're expected to do everything, then yeah, you definitely want to practice every discipline and try and get good at every one of them. Hydra Neon 27 says, how old are Tony now? Because I hear Tony's voice just like he's 20 years old. I actually have no idea how old Tony is. I found him in the middle of the road, knocked out, and I was on my way to the shops to repaint the house. Yeah, I guess he's... I have no idea. You can hear the bloody cricket in the background. Ta gueule! And how did you do your animations become in real life? And congrats for 100,000 subs. Well, thank you very much. Well, actually, I made a behind the scenes video for the Happy True Friends episode, the You're Driving Me Crazy, where I kind of explain like the puppets and how I animate them and stuff. The ones where the characters are in the real world, it's basically the same thing, except that I have I composite them in footage with After Effects, and I use the camera solver to track the scene and to have the characters move with the camera, because then it would just look like a flat image placed on top of the screen. All99 again says, how many times did the Blender animation test CGI break down? Takes you doing it. What's interesting with that one is that it actually happened by, it was a complete accident. I wasn't planning on making that video at all. What happened was, originally, it was, out of sheer boredom. I wanted to mess around with the, the internal wind tools and turbulence tools in Blender to, simulate wind on clothing and fur, essentially. And so, I was playing around with those on Tony, and it looked pretty good. So I thought, oh well, I'll actually I'll add a little animation and have him walking, and then he'll look around and do something. And then I thought, oh well, let's actually add an environment and have him maybe climb up this crazy mountain, and that looked pretty good. So then again I thought, oh well, let's add like a really nice like a camera rig and have it zoom in, and then that looked pretty good. So I said, oh well, let's actually add music and make it into this crazy scene. And then I was really pleased with it. So I thought, well, I'll make a little like not behind the scenes video, but more like because the video would have been like 30 seconds long. So I just tried to drag it out as long as possible by adding little I explained how it works and how like the layers and the compositing and stuff. So yeah, that's how that video happened. But if you're asking how long that particular video took to make, well, because I already had the Tony character, so I'm assuming we won't count that. A lot of the time that went into this video was actually due to me just messing around with different values and parameters for the wind. Like again, if I had to redo it, it'd be a lot quicker. But yeah, that entire video probably took me like 2 months maybe to make. And then of course the render time, which I left in the description for fun, and I had a lot of people commenting about that. The entire thing took about 32 days to render, and that was basically because I had the crappiest graphics card. Like I had an RX 580, I think. I mean, it's again, it's like a decent graphics card, especially back when I made that video. If back then I had the computer I have now, or if I used like the Render Street, the online render farm, it would have taken a lot, probably like not more than a day. But yeah, that is probably my favorite video on the channel so far. Charles Mutchery says, how can I become best at animation like you? Practice and work your ass off. Martin Dravuk, sorry I'm butchering that name again. What is the hardest part of animating? So I'm assuming you're talking about animation specifically in 3D. Like I said before, there's so many different disciplines. But if you're talking about animation specifically, I would probably say it would be respecting the 12 principles of animation. That's what it's called. I can't list them off from the top of my head. But there's basically, when you animate, there's 12 rules you want to follow. And actually, I wouldn't say the hardest part is incorporating those principles in your animation. I would say the hardest part is not overdoing them. I see this a lot in student demo reels. So if you take like a squash and stretch, or like follow through, it'll be so squashed and so stretched, and it's like you can tell they're trying to incorporate those principles, because they're like, oh well, if I use this it'll look good. It won't. Especially a lot of times it looks so goofy that you'd be better off just not using them at all. So that I would say is the hardest part, is using them appropriately. But then again, that just takes a lot of practice, and I would say especially a big part in figuring out if there's if the animation looks good is asking for feedback, getting other people's opinions, because the thing is, if you work on a piece of animation for that long, you'll start getting tunnel vision, and you won't really see the defect anymore, because you'll have played it so many times that you'll basically get used to the defects, and you won't really see it. But then if you have someone external come and, not even someone who knows animation particularly, just a normal person, they would probably say, oh, that looks a bit goofy, or that looks a bit strange. Not even knowing why, they'll just know, they'll just see that that it looks a bit strange. Especially, because a lot of times if you're producing an animation or something, you're not producing that animation for people who know animation. A lot of times it's for the general public. So a lot of times I would recommend getting feedback from the general public, because they're the people you want to impress, essentially. Rico Festsin says, do you play video games, and which one is your favorite? I do not play video games. In fact, I never have, and I hope I never will. I see a lot of people wasting so much time on video games, and it's like, I just don't. I'm just not that interested in video games. So unless I'm in a waiting room or I'm on the bus, I will play Doodle Jump. So there you go. That's my favorite video game, Doodle Jump. That's not to say you shouldn't play video games, of course. It's I don't play video games, but I waste so much time just watching mind-numbingly boring YouTube videos and just compilations of crap, and it's just it is important to have something you can use to relax and wind down. If some people it's television, some people like me it's YouTube, other people it's video games, which is that's completely fine as long as you don't overdo it and waste too much time on video games. But yeah, that would be that's a long answer, but yeah, basically no, I don't play video games. Liber Kreshy says, what does Tony like to do the most? He likes to ruminate about his existential dread and wonder why he's so different and why no one loves him. Alessio 2010 YouTube says, what program do you use to animate every animation you made? So if you're talking about animation specifically, in order it would be Synfig, Flash, then Moho, and now Blender, and then in general I just use After Effects, Photoshop. For editing I used to use Vegas, I used Premiere a little bit, but now I use DaVinci Resolve, which is fantastic. I'm never turning back. And then for vector design I use Inkscape. Quill Wants Pizza says, is Tony a wolf or fox or both? So originally I wanted him to be a husky, and the reason why he doesn't really look like a husky is quite simple. It's the ears. The ears don't look like husky ears. So the thing is that wolves or dogs or whatever, like canines in general, they tend to have ears that point up, and they're more they're less triangle than they are pointy, if that makes sense. Like the head kind of comes around and then the ears stick up. With Tony, he's got these great big triangles, which is more similar to what you would see on a fox or a fennec. So that's the reason why people are confused as to what he is, and to be honest, I am too. I don't know what he is. He could be a fusky. Yeah, there you go, he's a fusky. Joseph N says, is Bosnia a legitimate country? Yes. Pablo Elohen Olavia Toledo says, could you make a My Little Pony movie with Happy Tree Friends with Celestia and Moon in 20 years tired of retirement? No. Weeb Anime Memes and Country Ball says, have you ever had a cringe flashback? Dude, my entire life is a cringe flashback. SMV5 says, are you going to make a Five Nights at Freddy's animation? And do you know and like Five Nights at Freddy's? So like I said, I don't play video games. So no, I don't particularly like Five Nights at Freddy's. I mean, I'm familiar with the characters, but no, I'm not particularly fond of them. So no, I probably won't be. All99 again says, why don't you have phone case for Android users on your store? Oh yeah. Tulni Apsu says, are you gay? Actually, I'm straight as a pencil. All99 for the fourth time says, yes or no? Yes! Komi7 says, do you peg people? What, like random people in the street? Yeah, I wish. Théophile Hiver says, what is the biggest mistake beginner artists make? Oh, that's a good question. So there's definitely a lot of mistakes people can make, and in fact I've probably made every single one of them. I would say don't compare yourself to others. That's very easy to do, especially now with like internet and stuff. It's so easy to just go on like ArtStation and you look at all these crazy like pieces of artwork and you think, oh my god, I am so useless compared to these people. And it just makes you like so depressed. And you're like, oh well, screw this, I'll never be that good, and you just quit Blender or you quit art or whatever. Whereas if you just just kind of like kept it at your rhythm and at your level, you'd be you'd produce a piece of work, and yeah, it might not be as detailed or as advanced as what some others can do yet, but you'd say, oh, this is pretty good, I've improved and this and that. The thing is, a lot of times as well as on ArtStation, you don't know how long these people have been making art, and that's the thing. It's like you need to check. I don't think there's a way of knowing, but there definitely should be, right? You'd be like, oh, I've been doing Blender for 2 years, and this piece of art is so much better than me. But then you click on it, and it says, oh, this guy's been doing this for 30 years. Oh, all right, fair enough. But you don't see that. But yeah, don't compare yourself to others because you don't know how long they've been working on their particular art. And it's just you don't compare apples to oranges, right? It's just just keep your own, keep going at your own rhythm, and one day you'll get better. And I almost forgot to record a bloody outro. So it was just a quick Q&A. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope I answered your questions. And I know there's some of you that left questions that I didn't answer in this video. That was mainly because the questions were more or less answered in another question, and I was trying to keep this video fairly short. But yeah, other than that, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time.